Yay Networks.
I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. We are back for our second in our 12-part series on travel. And if you listened to last week, part 1, you heard that these travel series are going to be, some will air as my usual weekly podcast. Some are going to be an addition. I'll have actually 2 podcasts dropping each week. One will be on a normal wellness or nutrition topic and one on travels. So we're joined again this week by Dan Meyers. So we spent a lot of time with Dan last week hearing about his adventures, hearing about his travel and this world and these opportunities that he and his wife worked really hard together to create. So it didn't just happen that he was able to have a year experience of traveling the world and then a second year experience of traveling the US and an Airstream. If you haven't listened to that episode, take a listen. And we cover a lot of his experience, but also why travel is so important and what travel leaves us with once we return. So there's the experiences that we have while we're traveling, which is amazing. And it's often what we think of why we want to go visit a place. But it's also about how it changes us, how it can change our perspective, how it can change how we choose to live our life and what our priorities are, our focus is as we return. So that's sort of what this entire 12-week series is about. And we're taking the steps with you and for you and bringing in all these experts to talk with us about mapping out our travel plan, how to save. So Dan today will be talking about 6 very specific strategies to start saving to make that travel not just a dream, but to turn it into a reality. We'll be joined by guests who are talking about how to talk with your boss about this at work, all types of other conversations. So if travel is on your list, it's in your mind, it's in your dreams, listen to this 12-week series because we've got it packed full of experts, their experience, their insight, and real life, real world tips that we can put into practice. So as we mentioned last week, this is kind of taking part in 2 ways. So it's happening live every Monday, 12 noon through our Oxnard Health and Wellness Solutions department. So we have the Dream Bold initiative that is going strong throughout our system. And so this is something that is geared and specifically for Oshner employees, but we were like, this is such cool content. Why are we going to limit it to that? Let's make it public. We're bringing in all these experts. Let's put it on our podcast forum here so that everyone can hear and everyone can benefit from this. I say that though to say that you're going to hear, and I'll connect this in just a second to the Zoom, to where you're like, wait a second, they're talking about in the Zoom chat or they're talking about things like that. That's why. So we did this interview with Dan live in Zoom so that people who are within Oshner are linked into this and they can put messages in the chat. So you'll hear us referencing that. But we've specifically asked all of our guests throughout this 12 weeks to keep everything audio only. So there's not visuals. There's nothing you're missing out on. It is all audio friendly so you can hear it just as well, just as easily through the podcast. So with that, let's join in the Zoom. Thank you to everybody for joining us for our second in our series of the Adventure series, our Dream Bold series. And Scott Wonke and I are hosting specifically our Adventure and Travel series. It's Adventure is the category, but most people's dreams when it comes to adventure are travel specifically. And so you may say, well, Molly's a nutritionist here. In our Oshner Health and Wellness Solutions, and Scott's our physical therapist. Like, what's going on? So over these 12 weeks, we'll be sharing our experiences, just kind of layering in organically. But if you're not familiar with the Dream Bold initiative, this is something that's just, it's really, really cool. We're really fortunate to be able to have this. It is based on the concept outlined in The Dream Manager. The Dream Manager is a book by Matthew Kelly and Deidre Diaz, who is our VP, of course, of Oshner Health and Wellness Solutions. And I say that because we have other Oshner employees who will be tuning in and other non-Oshner employees who will be tuning in. But, you know, she believes and we believe that there's so much about our dreams and what we want to pursue personally that doesn't have to exist so independently from our work life. And so the Dream Bold Committee was formed, and over the past year, we've put out some surveys, we've asked questions, and what are people's big dreams? And again, it can be professionally, yes, but it can also be personally. And they really fell into 4 main categories so far. And we've addressed financial well-being, mental well-being. This is the adventure series that Scott and I are leading. And then towards the end of the year, there will be physical well-being. So again, we're in Series 2. We are joined by Dan Meyers, who y'all are going to hear a lot more from today. But Dan is with Adventure Wealth, and he has spent a year traveling around the world, a year traveling the United States in an Airstream, and he is back with us this time in session 2 to talk about 6 basic steps to take control of your finances and specific strategies to help us start saving. Before we get in those, Scott, do you want to just kind of give our listeners and viewers a rundown on what we'll be covering over the next 12 weeks?
Absolutely. As Molly mentioned, this is our adventure part, and we're going to do about 12 weeks of podcasts going everything from, we have a points guide coming, talk about how you can save for that trip. We're going to talk about how to travel solo. Some of our problems are we can't find someone to travel with. So we're going to talk about how to go by yourself. We're going to talk about a skiing adventure, of course, which is very exciting. And how to pack, and how to plan. So we're going to try to cover everything that you all have told us has limited your ability to travel with each one of these podcasts. This said, we're always open to new suggestions. So please feel free to send questions, comments our way. We'll try to address them as we can.
So Dan, welcome back. Thanks for spending a second Monday with us for this session.
I'm happy to be here, and I am traveling now, so hopefully my technology holds up too.
Yeah, I was a little worried that you were in a place where you were freezing when it was like my fault that I had everybody else didn't have the audio cued in. I was like, oh no. So I'm glad it is too. And in our first session, we really talked a lot more about the why, like why travel matters and how it can start to shape us as people, start to shape our beliefs, what matters to us, and how we live our life. It's the experience of while we're traveling that, of course, is enjoyable and really cool, but it's also what we take with us once we're back. And you gave us some homework. You gave us 3 questions. So for anyone who wasn't with us last week, can you kind of sum up what these 3 questions are, how you use them, and then we can go through, We'll restate them for people who are just joining us or also just kind of a refresher. But I'm also going to say to everybody who's listening or watching, put into the chat if you do have some feedback for these questions that you've been thinking about over the past week.
Sure. Yeah. So the 3 questions stem from George Kinder's work on life planning. And so I'm a financial planner, and an important part of that is figuring out, like, what do you actually want to do with your life? I know it's hard. Some of us are making pivots still. We're in our 40s and 50s, which is awesome. But the point of these 3 questions is try to really get the heart out of what you love, what drives you. And then for some people, it might mean travel and adventure. So that's how it all kind of folds in here today.
And so with the question, so when you're starting to ask these questions, and again, someone's coming in, they may be coming in for that financial guidance, and you start with these questions that might feel a little touchy-feely to them, but I love it because it's all layered in together.
Yeah, it's kind of like, mental and physical wellness. Like everything is connected. Like if you're not getting rest at home to begin with, nothing's going to work well. It doesn't matter how much you work out.
And the purpose of these questions is truly to help with your clients. Okay, they're coming in and they're looking at what's their financial plan going to be. But these 3 questions that we're going to talk about for our viewers, for our listeners, because also those of you who are on Zoom, this is also being recorded now. That'll be on podcasts and available forever on podcasts. And so these questions, though, are to help us align our priorities. So what we say is important to us or what we think is important, how are we actually translating this to what we're doing? And so that first question is, you have all the money you need. For now, you have all the money that you'll need forever in the future. And what will you do with it? And specifically from this moment forward, how will you live your life? And I think we might be able to say, how would you live your life any differently than what you have been doing?
Yeah, so this one really is kind of that lottery scenario. Like you just found out that you won $20 million in the lottery. What happens now? So for a lot of people, it's those things that you haven't been able to do because money is limiting you. So, maybe it's buying an awesome car, going on an awesome trip. Maybe it's telling your boss what you really think. But that's kind of where this first one lands us, is what are those things that you would check off right away that you'd want to do?
Scott, what would you do?
Well, so mine changed, mine evolved. So first of all, I want to say I saw a financial planner for the first time about 4 years ago, because before my financial plan was coming up with rent month to month. So completely changed. And I wish that I had these questions proposed to me. The questions I had were very clinical. I didn't feel good. I didn't have good answers. Stuff I had, this made it more personable. So I loved these questions and I took these home. I've given them to others. So thank you for that right off the bat. What would I do? Oh my God. The question is, what wouldn't I do? So probably get an Airstream, travel the world. There's a few mountains I've always wanted to climb. There's a few things I've always wanted to jump off of, but mostly for me, I would want my son to see everything that I've been lucky enough to see in my life.
So travel specifically would be a lot of what you do.
Kidding me? Yes. And not just outside the States, but within the States. Like, so many people have mentioned to us in the past, United States is amazing. There's so many places to go, things to see, things to do. But yes, travel would definitely be first and foremost for me.
And if anybody wants to put into the chat what yours would be if you had just all the cash in the world, how would that affect things? And go ahead, please put it into the chat.
I think I would get the Rolling Stones to play my birthday, because I think there'd be enough money there just to say, yeah, the Rolling Stones played my birthday.
When's your birthday?
April 19th.
You might,
Mick Jagger, if you're out there.
You might need to win the lottery to buy a Jazz Fest ticket this year, right?
Exactly.
So that first one
I love the way that Scott framed that about even talking to the financial planner and being like, what are your money goals? I don't really know. The way to look at money is as a tool. Like, how do I use the money to get to where I want to go? And so this helps kind of define that. And so we heard Scott's first question. Thanks for sharing that. But then how do we make the money work there and get us there?
Yeah, true. And go ahead.
I love the way you phrase that, because that's kind of unfortunately my patients. I'm from Detroit, so a lot of things automotive related to me. But I looked at it after reading your questions. How, if I had an old car and I want to drive it across the states, what would I do to make sure that it would make it? And I kind of look at my bank account now that way. Like, what can I do to make sure that I make it to my destination? So it really, you changed the frame of mind that I was looking at those dollar signs.
I think to that point too, that you said before, your financial strategy was just, how do I make rent?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's like, okay, looking at my bank account and looking at that as how you're fueling your car to get you to the next place, and like making sure you've got enough fuel in that account to do what you want to do. And I think that that's one of the things that when it comes to saving for travel becomes really challenging, because a lot of people might be in that mindset where you were, let's just make rent. And then, my gosh, how can I beyond that start to save for travel? So this first question, I feel like, is probably maybe a little bit easier for people to answer, because you really can, whatever it is, I'm going to do a cruise, or I want to do this, I want to treat my family to this, or things that we want to buy or do. The second question gets to be a little bit more, how do we really want to spend our time, and what becomes, what are truly our priorities? And so the second one is, you've just come back from the doctor, you discover that you only have 5 or 10 years to live, and you don't have unlimited money. So money is, we're out of the scenario of question one, but in these last 5 or 10 years you have, so you only have 5 to 10 years left, but you're going to feel really healthy during these. And so what are you going to do with that remaining time that you know you have? How will you change your life? How will you change the decisions that you're making along the way to live your life?
Yeah, so these questions start getting harder, and they start getting more emotional. And it's really kind of designed that way, because the first question opens up the art of the possible. You're thinking, if money is not an obstacle, what can I do? I can do all these things. But the second one brings us back down to earth. Says, okay, we're in the situation that we are today, but you only have 5 or 10 years left. What happens now? And so this starts to change a lot of times, when I see client answers on this. It goes from that, I would, buy a jet and fly everywhere I wanted, to, okay, what's important? I only have 5 or 10 years left. It kind of gets to the, Tim McGraw song I think we talked about last time of live like you're dying. It's like, okay, you're healthy still, but your life is finite, and now we see it. So we'll talk about the next question, but the focus gets to more personal things.
How much do people with this answer lean more toward travel and adventure versus things that are family and closer to home, would you say?
It starts to change a little bit because family is included a lot more typically. But a lot of times travel will be included with it. And so maybe you always wanted to take your parents somewhere. Maybe they haven't traveled much in their life, and they're like, I've always had this thing I wanted to do with my parents. And it becomes more realistic because if you even look at it from their perspective, maybe they only have 5 or 10 good years to travel. And so these things start kind of mixing in a lot more into the emotions.
Yeah, I think that is a really neat way to think of it. We had the opportunity a couple of years ago. There was a particular type of a trip that Brad's parents knew they would love. They had never done it. And it was something that we all kind of went in, and it was their 70th birthdays happened to fall, like their birthdays are in the same week. They're a year apart, but basically when each of them, one was turning 70, the other 69. And that was, instead of getting them a gift, we all went in and did this really cool trip that they had not done before. They probably wouldn't have put it as a priority for themselves. And that was such an amazing memory for my husband, for my sister-in-law, for my mother and father-in-law to really experience this. And it was something that, who knows, especially now with COVID, who knows? So it's sort of like, if we have the opportunity, why not? So that definitely, I felt my scope got a lot smaller when we went to that. And then the third question tightens it up even more. It's essentially the same type of a question, but now we only have 24 hours left. And that becomes like really like, wow. And so what would we wish that we had done? And that's a little bit more, probably more of the list time that we would do, which we then can start to say, these hopefully are not the scenarios. And so we have time to actually start to live these. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So if anybody is listening and wants to share, we're happy to hear from you. And if not, you can always message us separately too, if there's things that you want to share.
And I really like how the way they're formatted, and you should not skip ahead. So the way this got me thinking, reading these questions, don't skip ahead. It's, you can be wanting to get to the end and get to that last question, but it really made me think when I sequentially went through those questions. And again, the third one was very powerful. The first time you'd read that out to me, I was, wow, very powerful and very thought-provoking, the way that it was set up.
How did yours change, Scott, from all the money to your 5-10 years to your 24 hours?
Hugely. It funneled it down to who is important to me, not what is important to me. Those last little minutes that I would want to spend, part of me said, I want to see a great sunset, just sit there with my family, which was not really the case in question one, but it funneled down to watching a beautiful sunset, what's important, making sure that people I know and love are cared for as I close my eyes.
Which is a really cool thing that if you can, as you kind of, that funnel gets narrower and we are starting to think, okay, smaller, and just what you said, not what we're going to, do with this time, but who we're going to spend it with. And when we can merge the two of those when possible, it's almost like the best of all, so that we haven't maybe spent and saved all this time to go do something that might seem a little frivolous. Well, then also maybe there are ways that we can kind of like work in. Although some people are listening and are like, heck no, I'm going to take this trip. I'm not bringing my in-laws. I'm not bringing my parents, But, I think it's something to think about, like, okay, depending on how much or how often you're going to do something like this, that is something I think really nice to layer in. So with that and starting to kind of think, okay, these are the things that I'm saying are important to me. These are the things that I'm saying I would want to do, or they're a priority to me. But when it comes to actually making them happen, where am I putting my time, my focus, and my money? And that's a really big thing. We can say that we want these to happen, but they're really just a wish. They're truly just a dream until we start to plan for it. So you have, it's a lot of information, but you've kind of narrowed it down to 6 really key steps that we can take to take control of our finances, to start to take these dreams and put them into real life.
Yeah. So we'll get into the 6 money steps. I just wanted to point out one thing that was really interesting with Scott, and he really kind of narrated this really well. is a lot of times as we work down the funnel from question 1 to question 3, we work down from what seems impossible in the beginning, because we're talking about, I have all the money in the world, I'm going to do all this crazy stuff. It's like things we dream of as celebrities or rich people, or Branson flying to space. But as you noticed, when Scott got to the last questions, it's things that are very possible that he can do today. And so maybe your travel isn't going to be adventure travel, but maybe your travel is going to take you to go see your grandma in Idaho, or or something like that we can do, that becomes possible.
And I think what you said too, how many times are we just at our computers or at our screens or whatever it is, and there is the gorgeous sunset happening right outside. We don't even know it. It doesn't take that special trip to some faraway place to see an amazing sunset. So if you are going to see your grandma in Idaho, bring her out on the porch and look at that. So, there's so much that I think we have to that exact point. And this is about travel. But there's also a little bit of not just thinking of one day when that's going to be really cool. We can also start to think right now, what are these experiences that are surrounding me every day that are really positive and can really lift us up and enrich us so much beyond that costs nothing, or that we don't have to plan a lot, and it isn't one day down the road. So I think it's sort of like, sometimes in I'll be so happy if I lost this much weight, or I'll be so happy if I had that kind of a car or that house. We always have that I think many of us try to avoid that. And it can be so easy when we can just capture it as it's happening right around us. Okay. So walk us through our 6 steps.
Let's say, one more thing. I had one client, we went through this exercise, and, they're doing very well financially. And as we got down to the last question, it was, I would want my kids to know how much I love them, and I would write them a letter. So the next question is, have you written that letter yet?
Right.
No, but I need to. So accountability. But getting into 6 steps, these are the kind of exercises that I use and my wife and I use to pay off debt. Because we started when I graduated college, I had $25,000 student loan debt. I bought a brand new car. I couldn't even afford a down payment, so I added another $25,000 of debt. So I started out young in life with $50,000 in debt. And this is kind of stuff that I learned. A lot of it was through other people, like Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. I'll talk about that in the end, but it's a great way to kind of take out your debt. But these 6 steps, the first one is complete a current assessment, and I'll narrate afterwards. The second one is track your spending. The third one is creating a spending plan or a budget. A lot of people hate the word budget, so retitled it. Fourth one is just monitoring that plan and adjusting as necessary. The fifth one, and what we'll talk about today to get us to the adventure, is finally saving some money. Like, how do we save for this trip? And the 6th one is attacking your debt. So starting number 1 is completing a current assessment. So any business has a balance sheet. So on one side, it's all of your assets. So for us personally, this means your investments, your checking account, how much cash you have. And then the other side is your liabilities. So what are your debt? Your mortgage, car loans, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. You compare one to the other, and your number is either going to be negative or positive. You're going to have a negative net worth. You're going to have a positive net worth. But it's a great place to start, because if I asked you today, do you have a negative net worth or positive net worth, would you know?
So that's going through every single thing. So maybe that could be like a way to start with that would be, what are all your monthly expenses? And then, or your annual, like your monthly expenses, and then extrapolating that for the year. And then there's other annual things that might be the car insurance, or the things that might be once or twice a year payments. Putting all of that down, that would be essentially the dollars going out, and then comparing that to the different sources of dollars coming in.
So that's even before this.
Okay.
So that's more of a cash flow statement. Sorry, I'm a nerd. Like, I get into my accounting. Let me know if I'm in it too deep. But the balance sheet is starting at the very high level, saying, what do I own and what's my debt? Do I have more money than debt? Is kind of what it boils down to. Does that make more sense?
Yes. And you talked about, this a step previous to this one, and that's kind of what I took away from it. I did a deep dive. I mean, everything to where we're spending, $10 here, $20 here. I mean, it was a deep dive. And the way we started phrasing it, well, I used to phrase it, if I take care of this each week, that's another lift ticket. If I take care of this, that's half of a flight. So I broke it up in small, tangible chunks. But that was the deep dive because I really didn't have any assets. So, you're talking about, what do you own? Do you have a car payment, or do you own your car or house? I didn't have any of that. So mine was even in a smaller scale. So I just want to throw that out there, that I did it in a very, very small scale.
Yeah, and that's actually where we get to. So step number 2 is exactly what Scott's talking about. That's tracking your spending so that you know day to day where your money's going. So step 1 was figuring out, where do you even stand? Do I have a positive net worth or a negative net worth? Then step 2 is getting deep into those details. I love the way that he did it. And whenever I went through it, it was literally like writing down every expense that I had every day, because it becomes so much more real when you're tracking it. Like, did you have 5 expenses yesterday? Can you tell me? Did you spend money on 3 things? Like, just what happened to it? So this is how we start thinking about creating a budget. Because for a lot of people, it's like, I have really no idea what I'm spending. And from what I've seen anecdotally with clients and talking to people, only about 5 or 10% of people actually know what their budget and their spending is each month.
And there's hidden things like just recently we had, Brad happened to look at my bank statement, and my dad had, I see Danny laughing, but my dad had, just from when I had first opened a bank account when I was a teenager, and I'm 46 now. So this was 30 years they had been merged. It wasn't on his banking account, but for whatever reason they had been merged, and he had maybe the Chase private banking and he didn't have a charge for it. So I had that and never had a charge for it. And then my dad separated it because he was like, for whatever reason, he decided 30 years later, it's time to, and again, not on the same bank account, but under the same umbrella. So I didn't, but what happened was that when he separated them, I started getting the $35 charge because I didn't have the volume of use that he did. And so and Brad's like, wait a second, you're getting a $35 charge every month. I hadn't even noticed it. And then when he's like, times 12, he said, just as Scott said, that's a flight. That's a plane ticket, So then it was the call to the bank and changing it and bumping the grade of checking account down, which took 8 minutes. I mean, no time, but it saved over $400 a year. That was just for nothing. So some of these things that we may, by doing that, it's like looking at everything that you're spending, but then maybe where are some of those sneaky sources where your money's going also.
Yeah. Every decision we make, or everything we do, is a decision that we make. And so, if you're going out to eat, 5 times a week and spending thousands of dollars a month on going out to eat, you're making the decision to do that. And so you may not know the impact right now, but if during this exercise you're saying, okay, I do want to take that trip to the mountains. Well, right now you're telling me that you don't, because you're spending it every month on the restaurant.
We do alcohol free for 40 every year, where people give up alcohol for Lent. I almost said for lunch.
Just lunch.
Just lunch.
Very New Orleans.
Very New Orleans, yeah. But when people give up alcohol for Lent, and over the 40 days, people talk about the different benefits, and a lot of people talk about the cash. And over just that 40 days, for some, it's hundreds of dollars that they're saving on, and that's just alcohol. So we're not even talking about dinners out and stuff like that. So yeah, really looking at where's this going. Yeah. Okay.
When we talk about this next step we're getting into of creating a budget, and Molly, you've had great information on this. A lot of people, grocery bills are huge, and they're getting bigger and bigger every month, it seems like, because of inflation. And a lot of people think that there isn't way to eat healthy on a budget. And so there's some of the stuff that you've done great. Like, we've incorporated so many black beans into our life. It's good. It's, protein, all that can make a big difference too.
When you look at when you're talking about where your money is going, talk to us about the different functionalities of different banks or bank accounts where it'll categorize where your spending's going into different types of spending. Yeah.
So it's a great lead in on this tracking your spending. There's a couple different tools that you can use. There's sites like mint.com where you can plug in all of your credit cards and all your bank cards, and it creates the budget for you. And so it tracks every month to see where it's going.
Mint, MINT.com? Okay.
Correct.
And that would require you to then enter everything manually?
You would be able to integrate into your credit cards.
Okay.
So you would log in credit card through mint.com, and it would pull it all in one spot.
Would it be credit card and bank checking account? Okay.
Yeah, so we can see all sides. Personal capital is another one. We'll talk about you need a budget to really go with one. We'll talk about in the next plan. Depending on your skills, like there's other ways that a lot of credit cards now, when you log into your online account, they'll have little budget tracking tools where it'll show you where the money is going. You may have to do a little work to categorize it, kind of actually get it right. That's another option.
On ours for that, it'll say like entertainment. It breaks them into that. It might be like clothing, entertainment, groceries. And sometimes it's not completely accurate because they're sort of guessing, but it's really a close bet.
Yeah. And to keep in mind that this is a reactive way to do it still. And so this is looking back about, okay, what happened? Yeah. What did I spend it on?
Yeah, good point.
And so as we transition to the next step, we'll talk about how to be more proactive.
There's got to be, I mean, when you look at that, I'm not even saying it's got to be, I know when you take a close look at that, you go, wow. And this is where the bulk of my cash is going. This is where the bulk of my spending is going. And most of it is elective.
The shame a lot of sets in, and the sweat, and the shame, and yes.
And then you're like, oh man, because it's really easy, and especially with online purchases now, or just online auto pays monthly, whatever it is that we have. Whereas I think even a decade or two ago, it was much more conscious. You had to get the checkbook out and think about it, and now you click. It's much less thought goes into how we separate from our money.
For sure. Yeah, I was talking to a client, and they said they went to the store to get something, and the parents are trying to teach about money management, and they're like, no, that's not in the budget. We're not going to afford it today. And they said, well, why can't we just buy it on Amazon? And it clicked with them. The kid didn't even realize that Amazon, you're spending money just like you are in other places. It's so simple.
It's a button and it arrives immediately. What do you find, or do you have kind of a breakdown or a ratio of where most people's spending is going, if you're looking at entertainment versus necessities?
A lot of it depends on family size and kids and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't really have those. I don't want to guess at them right now.
It's so individual. And I guess it's also individual of where someone is right in this moment as far as where they're spending. And people may have had a history of high spending and high frivolous spending, and now they've kind of tightened it up. But I would also imagine, like you said, the larger your family gets, that probably is coming down a bit. Okay. So we've got creating that balance sheet, tracking what's happening, like what's currently happening, starting to create this spending plan. And what does that look like when you're starting to create this? And I like the word spending plan better than budget.
I'm going to go with spending plan from now on.
Budgets are so limiting. Mm-hmm. So at this point, you should have a decent idea of what's been happening in the last couple months. And so, whenever you log on to these like mint.com, so you can usually go back 2 or 3 months to tell you kind of what's happening. So you know where your money's going, you're getting a better idea. Now you want to get proactive. So this is where we talked about, we've been reactive, we looked at what happened, and now we're getting proactive. And so typically you want to do like something like 4 or 5 categories and start estimating what your budget should be each month, what you think you can do. So the big ones that we talked about already is groceries. That's usually a category all by itself. The second one is entertainment. And so this, groceries can be more staples, but there's always ways to kind of cut that back. Entertainment is when we get into going out to eat, spending on drinking, going to the Saints games, that kind of stuff. It can sometimes cut back a little bit more. So that's the second one is groceries. Another one might be clothes. If you want to kind of monitor what's happening with clothes and things like that, that's a good one. I've actually worked with clients before and added one just for Amazon, because it's amazing how much people spend on Amazon and don't really even realize it. So Amazon's a good one too. So, what are the areas in your life that kind of make these big categories? You can do it with utilities, but a lot of times those are more fixed. Like you're not really going to be able to cut down your air conditioning or water costs or electric or water costs.
There's no way to bargain that, right?
Exactly. You can't call your electric company typically. And so kind of set what your estimates are or what your goals are. A lot of times people will get pretty aggressive here and will be thinking that they can cut back more than they can. And so, that can be a challenge in the beginning. Just know that it may not be right. But just by doing this step, you're starting to tell your money where to go, rather than your money just kind of wandering out on its own. So a lot of people will feel like at this point they got like a 20% raise because all of a sudden they're monitoring their money and they're telling it where to go.
And by doing that, would you say would it be, do you recommend like a weekly or monthly? How would you do that? Because it's for someone who, like Shalita just said, Amazon's addictive. If someone's in this habit and they've got these expenses going out, okay, you can say, I've been spending X amount weekly or monthly on this outlet, and I'm going to I want to dial it back to this amount. But what are some of the things that, what are some of the action steps to do that? Because it's one thing to say you're going to spend less in these, let's just call them I said the word frivolous, but it could be frivolous or, the luxury spending or, the things that just aren't the necessities.
So this depends on how serious you want to be and how fast it's making a difference. What we did, and this is the Dave Ramsey method too, was we went to a cash budget. So each one of these categories, we estimated how much we would need. And then at the beginning of the month, not at the end, at the beginning of the month, we would take the money out of our bank account and have it as cash. And so we would literally get these envelopes of cash and, sorry, your call there. That these envelopes would be how much we would have for the month. And so when we went to the grocery, and things are harder now because, everything's kind of electronic and all that. But when we would go to the grocery store, we would pay with cash.
But this wasn't that long ago. I mean, this was only 8 years ago. So things were still really automated there, and you were still pulling out your envelope of cash. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very much old school, I guess. And a lot of, it may be too hard for a lot of people. But if you really want to step it up fast and make a difference really fast, the cash budget makes a huge difference.
We would go to dinner with y'all during that time. And first of all, more often than going out to dinner, we would go to one of our houses for dinner because of the exact reason that Dan is saying. And it helped us be aware too. Like if you go out to a restaurant, you're going to immediately spend, fill in the blank. But having dinner at one of our houses was a real way to do it, to still spend that time together, because that was what was important, less about the place that we were going. But if we did go to a restaurant, out comes the envelope, right? Or it wasn't really an envelope. Maybe it was in your wallet, but it sounds better if you're pulling the envelope out at the table. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's if you're getting very aggressive. Otherwise, you could continue with the notebook if you wanted to and write down every expense so you can kind of track it manually, or you can just kind of follow up on checking the mint.coms or the credit card site, at least every 2 weeks. And certainly at the end of the month to kind of see how you did against your planned budget.
I do think that's a good point because some people are real pen and paper and visual on that. And looking at it online is going to be less impactful than if they kind of had it in a notebook, like you said.
Yeah. And anytime you pay with cash, it gets really fast. Where you're swiping a credit card, or even easier now, easier ways to pay like Amazon, it's not behavioral at all. Like you don't even connect it with money anymore. So that's one of the biggest challenges is it's kind of like you want to feel the pain because only then are you going to make the difference.
So actually one question that was passed on to me that, and I'll phrase it the way that I've done it. We at my house call it Ain't Here No More Fund, which means that's something that we've been paying for. Like the best example, like diapers, now they're expensive. So we don't need diapers anymore. Not for me, for my son. And so we all of a sudden have that money, and we're setting that aside into that we don't have to pay for that anymore. And same thing, once we paid off a vehicle, we still make those payments into a fund for travel or emergency. Is there any other suggestion when it comes to little things like that slowly add up?
Yeah, we'll get into it with the debt for sure. But there's a strategy called debt snowball that's kind of the same thing. And so You list all your debts, largest to smallest. And as you pay off each lower level of debt, you roll that into the debt snowball, another Dave Ramsey term, and you start successively having more money to pay off the debt in these other areas.
You've been accustomed to this money going out. You haven't been accustomed to having it. So when you still operate under that thought process, you're not looking at it as free money that you got. You look at it as that's still money going out, but it's going out into savings for what we've prioritized.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy. I hadn't heard of that. What'd you call that again, Scott?
Oh, ain't here no more. So it's a New Orleans phrase when something is gone. Like what? You remember what that furniture store was?
Oh yeah. I don't know about the but
yeah. Let him have it. That one. Sorry.
Yes, there's several. I know who you're talking about. He does a dance also.
I won't do that.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Yes, but grocery stores, all of that in New Orleans ain't here no more, right? As it is. Frankie and Johnny, thank you, Shalita. And so, yeah. So that I love the ain't here no more. The saving strategies too. Are we on saving strategies? So are we on number 5 yet for that? I think that was a great strategy that Scott shared.
Yeah, we're rolling into it. So we just talked about number 4, which is monitoring and plan and adjust the budget as necessary. And it's, if you're married here or have a partner, you really have to be on the same page. Like if one person's trying to do this by themselves, it's a hard battle. And so a lot of times these 3 question exercises that we talked about in the beginning can actually help people get on the same page because it can maybe help you get focused together. And so if you're trying to go through this and you're not having luck getting your partner or your spouse on board, don't really be surprised, but just figure out how you can try to get on the same page. And the 3 questions might help.
The 3 questions could help. And then I think maybe if there are certain saving strategies, like what Scott just said, the Ain't Here No More Fund, like maybe that seems more palatable to someone as a saving mechanism than feeling like they're having money taken away that they can spend less on something. There may just be other ways to relate to them and what that would be. Yeah. Okay.
And be ready for those surprises, like the checking account. And I learned how much face cream costs. Going through my budget with my wife. So just be ready for those surprises.
My husband is ready for that surprise. He says when we have the conversation, he calls it lotions and potions. I'm glad it's not just me. I'm glad because your wife strikes me as not a very frivolous person. So I'm really happy that that's the same with her. Yes. Thank you. The women listening and watching here, we all can relate. Yes. And that's when we're like, I don't need you looking at my banking account because there's a lot of that. Yes. And it's also saying it's like where you can save, like, what are we spending money on? Maybe that is either a service that we can do for ourselves or something that we're buying one version, but we can either buy a less expensive one that does the same thing. Or I'm all about if when it comes to clothing, I'll have things that are favorites and I just buy them in every color. But I'll find that one that I might buy at the store and then I'll look on places like eBay or Poshmark and find, oh, they have that, but it might be half price or less and it's maybe gently used, but that's okay. And so there's ways that instead of paying that premium every single time, or coffee is a huge one. We had somebody tell us this weekend they got an espresso machine and Nespresso makes, I think it's the best coffee that you can make at your house. It's a machine-based coffee. She told us this weekend that her family has saved over $100 a day.
What?
A day. Yes. They have 3 children, husband, wife, 3 children. And the kids were going to, we'll just say it, Starbucks, at least once a day each. And the mom and dad were, and the kids were often going twice a day. And she said they have saved about $100 every single day since they got the Nespresso. She thinks it's the best thing ever.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. So where are some of those? And that's again, kind of our steps earlier as you're identifying where's your money going. Okay. Yeah. It's going to coffee. Well, there's a really easy way that we can do that on the cheap compared to coffee shop coffee. Danny, can I share the story about you doing your own plumbing in your house? Because I think this
course.
is sort of an example. So there's things that obviously there's things around our homes that we can do ourselves. And then there's things that we're going to have to hire out. And like we had our fence, we needed our fence painted, but instead of like hiring someone to paint it, we were like, well, let's just paint it ourselves. It was fun. It was a challenge. It felt very rewarding to have it done after, and all it cost us was like the cost of the paint. And so then there's other things like, obviously, if our AC goes out, my husband's not climbing in there and seeing what's going on with like the HVAC or whatever that would be. Dan, on the other hand, when they were like really in the deep mode to save, so they were here in New Orleans, they had bought a house, they had renovated it, they were really saving intently to travel for this year abroad, a year around the world. And when he says he has the envelope of money, I mean, he lived every bit of it. And so as they were renovating this house, it was an old house, uptown New Orleans, and they really took this like funky little thing and made a gem out of it. And they did a large part of the work was them hands-on. And so one of it was plumbing. And so he brought in experts. I mean, if you
didn't need a license.
What'd you say?
Just stuff that didn't need to be licensed to do. Make that clear.
That we're saying on the podcast. Right. Let's be clear on this. So one day we're like going over to Jocelyn and Dan's to pick them up for dinner. And like we pull up, and Jocelyn, first of all, is hilarious. And she was along with it. She was along for the ride. Like, we will be on this budget or spending plan, and she would sort of like moan and groan about it, but really more pretend. I mean, she was in it. Like she liked to kind of roll her eyes about it, but she was in it. But when it came to certain things at the houses, she was like, Dan, let's just spend the money. Like let's hire. And Dan would be like, no, like I've watched it on YouTube. I know how to do this. And so there was one time that we pull up to get y'all for dinner. Jocelyn's outside on the side yard with the garden hose in a swimsuit, taking a shower with the garden hose on the side of the house, making a point and making a bold statement that the inside plumbing was not working. The outside hose worked. So she's got her shampoo. She's got her everything that she needs to like fully shower outside in her swimsuit on the side of the house, making an entire scene and statement. It was the funniest thing ever. Dan is so mad. He's like steaming and she's like, I'll be just a minute. I had to come out here for the shower. But that was Dan saying, why pay someone to do something that I could do myself? It sort of backfired.
Yeah, that's where it's important to be on the same page and also know your
limitations. Okay, so saving strategies. I'm wondering if anybody too has any that you can put into the chat that have been like really effective for y'all. I think some of the really obvious ones are, like we said, face creams or clothing or coffee, these things that we think we quote need, but do we really need them? Going through your closets, how much of your closet are you even wearing? Maybe instead of, if you've got a closet full of things, bringing it to a consignment place, because then as it sells, you do get a little bit of cash back from that. So what are some ways that we can, the closet, like we can really start to streamline, like just how much do we need and where does this money need to go?
Consignment shops for those closets.
Yes.
There's two strategies that I'll talk about just real quickly on the savings piece. The first one is create an emergency fund. So you know where your money's going now. Hopefully you're able to save some every month. So you need to make sure that you have at least $1,000 in emergency fund. That way, if something happens, you don't have to put it on the credit card and maybe go back into debt. So creating an emergency fund is big. Before you're even starting to save for travel, make sure you have that emergency fund. The second is just a strategy of paying yourself first. And so we should hopefully know where our money's going every month now. We've gone through this exercise for a couple of months. Now, in the beginning of the month, same time you're doing your budget and taking a cash out or planning your spending for the month, pay yourself first. And so start moving money from your checking account at the beginning of the month to a savings account. And this could become a travel savings account. And so maybe every month, at the beginning of the month, you're putting $200 or $300 into this savings account. Because a lot of people will say at the end of the month, depending on how much I've saved, then I'll save that amount. But that rarely works. But if you do it at the beginning of the month and then you're limited on how much money you have, you're going to be a lot more successful that way.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I like the advice of kind of that emergency fund, because that happens and it adds a stress. And you're right. If you're in a pinch, you're going to have to put it on your credit card. So if you can avoid having that debt. Yeah.
Have your strategies evolved at all? New life circumstance. Have you evolved any of your strategies to save a little more money, or have you been a little more lenient with the envelope? What has changed for you?
Yeah, we certainly loosened up. The way we were living, and Molly's stories, obviously weren't all sustainable for a long time. And so it was more of a sprint to get somewhere. But we were driven to do it because of where we were going. And so, a lot of times you're not going to be able to hit these goals in life if you don't have something major that you're passionate about, that you're driving to. And so that's going back to the 3 questions. What will that be? What can motivate you to sacrifice to be able to do these things?
And I think I know what the answer is, but I just want to pose the question anyway. So looking back, let's say you're now in another country, you're world traveling, you've done everything you could to save up for this. Was there any point where you thought that was too much? That wasn't worth it? Doing all that to save?
No, we felt very lucky, the life that we've been able to live, and very fortunate. And it didn't just happen to be. It wouldn't have happened if we weren't very strategic about doing it.
And that's why I wanted to pose that question, because I've kind of done some similar things to be able to travel, to explore, to have experiences, and never once ever thought, I wish I hadn't done that much. I really wish I didn't work so hard to save that. That is never the case. So I just want to throw that out there for anyone who's thinking about this is tough to do. Absolutely. It's going to be so rewarding, and you're not going to think about it when you do have those experiences.
And it's things that stick with you. It's memories that are going to stick with us, and they're with us for a lifetime versus what are we putting that money to right now? How long is that stuff with us? Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's one thing that you may not miss it if you never did it, because you're not going to know what you're missing. But if you do it, you're probably never going to look back that you shouldn't have.
Yeah, the everyday Starbucks experience maybe bring a little warmth or comfort during the day, that one day, but it's nothing like that trip that you might be able to do that you'll remember forever.
And it's about these habits that because we're in the habit of stopping at whatever that Starbucks or coffee shop, fill in the blank might be, or this is what we've done because we're always doing it and we're sort of automated and we don't even think about it. So really putting together that tracking where your expenses are going, let that be a wake-up call of which of these spending habits do we really need to find replacement behavior for. And when we talk about nutrition, when we talk about anything about changing a behavior, there is a replacement behavior that comes into it, exercise, food, any of this, and spending is going to be the same thing. So when we see that, wow, this is eye-watering, okay, we don't need to just accept it, or we don't need to just completely delete it, but there's going to be something that can be a replacement behavior that can maybe ease the pain there. And then from there, so once you do see, okay, we're able to, the Ain't There No More fund or whatever it might be, that we have this money that was going out or money that we're now trimming back some expenses in certain areas, would you say that we would want to automate it to where it goes into a savings account? What's the best way to make that happen so that we're consistent with it?
Yeah, exactly. Doing that automation of paying yourself first. A lot of people, it works well on their bank accounts. You can usually have multiple savings accounts. Is that you have those specific goals. Like maybe you have a goal to buy a new car, or you have a goal to take a trip or do a big adventure. You could even name your savings account that goal, of whatever the name of it is. And then every month that money goes in. And it's amazing how over time that adds up. Like all of a sudden you're doing $300 a month, and at the end of the year, you saved up $3,600. It's like, whoa, I can pay for my entire trip. I don't have to put any of it on credit cards or at least carry any debt for it going forward.
So the auto transfer into that account or accounts plural. And I like the idea of naming the account because that also just makes it fun too, that you're kind of seeing that accrue. Anything else that's our big takeaways on our savings, our tracking, prioritizing that you would say, Dan? To the folks who are on Zoom, if there's, again, anything that you've had that you're like, man, this has been a game changer for me and other people could benefit from hearing it, we'll spend a few more minutes with Dan kind of talking through last wrap-ups here, but we would love to hear from you guys. I see that Susan just did a comment about that we can set up automatic transfers through our Workday to up to 3 separate accounts. So that's great. I didn't realize that. I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
Or it comes to your checking account then. That comes out of your check, right?
Does that.
Yes. And then, so Susan's giving us this tip. So Workday, for those who might be listening to this who aren't part of Ochsner, Workday is sort of one of our internal systems that is kind of helps to organize and manage all things through like on the back end of our work. So being able to go in there. So wherever we work, if you're working for an organization, a larger organization, talk to them and see if you could route it to different savings account. Shalita is saying, yep, I already do that. And as Susan said, if you don't see the money, you can't spend it. It's as if it's not even there. Yeah, you don't miss it. So
and another way is you get a raise at work or something like that. Just automatically put that raise in the savings. It's kind of like the ain't here no more, or it was never their fund.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. Good tips, y'all. Dan, any other things, or Scott, any other insight before we wrap up that would be helpful if we're thinking prioritizing and not letting it stay just a dream, helping follow through to make it a reality?
No, I was just going to say, Dan touched on this. So they were in a sprint to get where they wanted to go. So that was a pretty extreme. In plumbing, that means you're sprinting. So you need to know when you want to take this trip to see if it is a sprint or a marathon, how much you can chip away at it, because every little dollar is just one little chip, and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah.
What about putting a reminder about like where your trip is or your goal, something that's a visual reminder?
I love that. Yeah, print it off and put it on the refrigerator. Go old school.
Or a sticky note on your computer if Amazon's your thing, have it on your computer there.
Because every time you make a decision, or every transaction you make, every purchase you make, it's a decision that you're making. It's a vote that you're making. It's saying, I prefer this over that. So find that thing you're passionate about. And that's where the 3 questions are so good at helping define in your life what's the most important. Because you may just not know right now. You may be not really clear on what's most important to you. But once you do that exercise, and you've now defined what's most important to you, every time you're doing something the opposite of what's driving you that direction, you're making a decision to do it. So see if you can get that changed.
And I love that from Shelley, vision boards.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in our chat came out vision boards. I also think, and I keep relating it back to when you're making a big lifestyle change like nutrition or weight loss or something like that. When you share your goal verbally with other people, the more that you share, it ups that accountability. And not that we want anyone, again, looking to see, well, are you really sure you want to spend your money on that? Sort of like nobody wants their spouse being like, are you really going to eat that? But when we share that goal, it does become more of a reality. And the more people that we share it with, we know that for our health and wellness goals and for something like this, for saving for travel, it's sort of like sometimes when something is so big and it stays in our head, it doesn't seem like it could ever be a reality. It seems like you're almost playing pretend. And Dan, I'm sure you felt that way. No, we're going to save our money. We're going to buy this house and flip it. We're going to use these funds to travel the world. It feels like you're playing pretend at a point. And then the more you say it, though, the more it becomes a reality and the more you're bringing it into reality. Whereas if it just stayed in your head, it almost doesn't feel like it's real. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay. So our big takeaways, if someone's like, okay, Dan, we've covered a lot. You were with us session 1, session 2. What are the biggest things that you would tell someone if they're like starting to get motivated or they have been motivated about really making travel a priority and prioritizing financially for travel? What's your like 1 or 2 big things to let them know?
I think it's finding the passion to drive the will to do it. Because if you're not finding something that you're passionate about, or a trip you really want to take, or an adventure you really want to make, then you're not very likely to actually make a difference and start doing it. But go through the questions, see if there's something that sticks out. I love the idea of the vision board. Make it start feeling real and just start taking the steps to get there. You can do it. Like, we have all the tools that we need. You can do it.
Well, fantastic. And Susan, do you mind putting the email in the chat, our dream team email in the chat, so that if you've got things that you either wanted to share or things that you just want to share to have that accountability or to share with someone to make it more of a reality, you can always email us through there as well. And I'll put it on the podcast episode notes also. Well, thanks, Dan. We really appreciate your time for 2 weeks with us.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
All right. Well,
Thank
thanks. And y'all, we will be back next week. And I'm doing a quick frantic look to see. Oh, next week, y'all, those of y'all who are listening, I believe Scott's going to be out of town, but we have, there's a website called Travel with Lolly. And the thing that I can relate this most to is when we got married, there was these planning sites. Okay. 1 year out, do this, 10 months out, do this, 6 months out, do this. And that's what this website is, this Travel with Lolly website. It was the best roadmap for planning your travel. Everything from if you need to stop your mail, everything that you would need to think of for any different size trip. So Lolly is our guest next week. So if this is something that you're really starting to think about and starting to make it more of a reality and kind of planning your step-by-steps, you'll want to definitely tune in for her. All right. Well, thanks, Dan, for your time. And we'll we posted the links for your website last week in the chat. And then this week again, in the show notes of the podcast episode, we'll have all that information again for anybody to reach out to you with questions or more guidance. So grateful to Dan for joining us this week for a second week in a row with us. And also grateful to Scott Wonke for joining me in this 12-week series in general to bring travel to the forefront, to make travel not just something that we dream about, but giving us these tangible steps to make it a reality. As always, I'll include the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode, and always let me know what you think as you incorporate these strategies, as you start to plan and kind of dip your toes and start to think about what your next travel or trips or experiences might be. I want to hear about it always. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com. And you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.